the space of graphic medicine, aware that the people coming to us are people that want to tell stories where there's a certain amount of healing involved. And so we've sort of, well, I mean, it's still comics and still graphic novels, but we've grown to be really interested in that particular side of it. So I just want to invite anybody to go to sawcomics.org. Otherwise, my board of directors will be mad at me for saying that. And go to check out our graphic medicine section there. Matthew and David mentioned that last year at SAW, we hosted the 2025 Graphic Medicine Summit online. There's like 13 or 14 recordings. They were all great. No Zoom snafus. All right, anyway. But over the course of all of this, working with people on graphic medicine and graphic memoirs, I realized that there's, it was more about telling their story. It's more than telling their stories. There's a certain rite of passage that comes, like, there are rites of passage. No, how do I click? Can I arrow? No, arrows don't work.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
There
it.
you go, there you go.
How do I go back?
Back arrow.
Back arrow? Oh yeah, that worked. Okay,
Looks like you're playing the game.
there we go. That's what I wanted. Yeah. So so there are life experiences that a lot of us go through. Certainly we all go through birth and death. And I think those are the only two universal ones, but a lot of us go through adolescence or weddings or illnesses and things like that. And those in themselves are rites of passage. But I found that for the people that come to our space in our school and maybe here, that the act of drawing is a separate rite of passage for it. And in order to integrate that transformation, they need to go through that drawing process or something visual anyway. I think Suzy's was a little bit different. I have a little theory about Suzy's move now. Anyway, so I mentioned that for me, the steps, quote, the steps. Live a challenging health experience. Notice your place in the common story, which is what I did in my book, and I'll talk about. And then I document the story, integrate it into the self. So that's a layer of ritualistic practice that it takes. And you don't just go through the event; you have to sort of integrate it. I found that Suzy, and Suzy will talk soon. I found that Suzy's was a little bit different. Live a challenging health experience is what I wrote. Notice that there's no common story. The story actually hasn't been written. And then try to make a map and record it for others. To me, Suzy's experience, and I hope if she disagrees, we'll have a really cool conversation about it.
Do you think there's a right way
What, a right way to what?
and a wrong way?
No,
just kidding, I'm just
no,
kidding.
there's no. All right, so wow, this font looks crummy. Anyway, the big two transitions I mentioned, birth and death, and then other ones, weddings, leaving home, birth of child, things like that. So those are the ones I just mentioned. And so I went through and I looked around for some, I really would love to hear, especially at the end of the day, if anybody's got examples in graphic novels and medicine of people documenting their own birth, that would be great. The only example I can think of is Kampong Boy by Lat. He's a Malaysian cartoonist, and he talks about his birth, and the experience of the rituals around it. And so that was actually the only experience I found of it. And it's a pretty great book, not exactly graphic medicine, but it certainly serves as this exercise, for example. However, death, I found at least two people who were so certain they were going to die, they documented it. This is from The Photographer, which is a great book about a photographer who goes with Doctors Without Borders to Afghanistan in the 90s. And he's so certain, he foolishly goes off on his own to cross this mountain pass. And he takes photographs constantly. And he's so certain he's about to die that he says, I take out one of my cameras, I choose a 20mm lens, really detailed, a very wide angle, and shoot from the ground to let people know where I died. And then you see the image that he took. And then he passed out after this and then was found the next morning and managed to live somehow. This is the last. So he really did think he was dying. He really did think this was the last moment. Another example I could think of was Coma by Sarah Slattery, which probably a lot of people have read, where she really did come very, very close to death, if not flatlining. I'm trying to remember exactly, but she documented all the experiences that she remembers having internally, which is great. And actually, she brings another ritualistic aspect into it. If you research how she composed the book, she actually made these little clay models of all the personas in the book and sort of worked with them in the retelling of the story. And I find that really interesting in itself. A really good example of adding to that ritualistic method. All right, what else is next? Okay, so Birth of Child, Lucy Knisley famously has a book, but there are lots of other people about. Birth Never Happens in your book, right? It only, oh, it does. Oh, okay, so
You didn't
Suzy's,
finish
I think, what?
You didn't really-
No, I couldn't, it was a lot to take in 2 days. I got to the fertilization part. So Suzy also has a birth story. Anyway, so also difficult passages, of course, the loss of a parent or guardian is a big one, loss of a pet, a major illness or hospitalization. I think these are the kinds of things that we're seeing more here in graphic medicine. And one thing I noticed in a lot of examples of in grieving situations is people drawing in as much detail as they can the loss that they're experiencing. This is Roz Chast, and if you know Roz Chast's New Yorker stuff, you probably never knew she had this in her to draw this in this way. But there she was at her mother's bedside as she was passing away, drawing her. And this is Harry Bliss's book about, I forget the name of the dog, but his dog who passed away. Georgia Weber has a really good book out about losing her voice called Dumb. And this isn't the same kind of drawing, that's an observed drawing. And I think this is a more exploratory, symbolic drawing, but it's still that attempt, I think, to capture the emotion and the sensation of the experience. That's the rite of passage that's happening here for her. It wasn't merely the illness, it was the trying to understand and frame it. And so that's a visual example of that. And here's Suzy. This is one of my favorite moments. That's the mass that you settle on, right?
Yes,
For the
it is.
tumor. And Suzy wrote, "When I sit down to write, I think I'm not alone," which we'll come back to in a moment. And all of these examples, again, I think are examples, and here's more from Suzy and then from Zara Slattery. All of these are attempts, I think, to sort of, through the act of drawing, incorporate what's going on in the body. To me, that's the most interesting part about this rite of passage idea. So we have a reading schedule.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
There we go.
That's my intro. Now,
Okay, great, thank you.
yes.
Well, thank you for having me part of this. Thank you, Caroline, and David and Matt and Angela for doing the graphic notes. I spent more time on my hair this morning than I did on my slides, so I apologize. And you can tell I didn't spend a lot of time on my hair either. I am going to invite up a guest reader because my book opens.
What, go blinds? Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, my book opens with an imaginary interview.
Help, Mike.
So I did a 20 city tour of this book and I had some celebrity readers and I invite this celebrity to join me at the podium for this first opening. So this is what I called pre-chapter 1, procrastination. And this is Terry Gross, obviously, host of National Public Radio's Fresh Air for Young People who no longer know this. The book came out 20 some years ago. I'm sorry. All right, go ahead.
From WHY1. This is Terry Gross. Fresh Air. My guest is Suzy Becker, author of I Had Brain Surgery, What's Your Excuse? She is also the author of 3 other books, including All I Need to Know I Learned from My Cat, an international bestseller in the 1990s. Suzy, in addition to being a writer, you are a small business owner, teacher,
Was.
AIDS bike-a-thon organizer. Writing is not exactly a sideline, but your life isn't the quiet, contemplative writer's life some might imagine.
I discovered writing at the end of my career as a cat whisperer.
There's nothing about that in your bio.
I made it up. I'm making the whole thing up. It's a form of procrastination, I guess, making up interviews with myself on National Public Radio when I should be writing it up.
Well, I'm going to disappoint a lot of listeners when I admit I was not a fan of your cat book. I'm not a cat person or a big fan of gift books in general, or whatever they call that genre. Your new book is altogether different. Not in all I need to know I learned from my CAT scan.
It's it still makes a nice gift. Oh, wait, she should say that.
It's nonfiction, very personal, a memoir of sorts. People may think, brain surgery, who wants to read about that? I wanted to tell you, I could relate so much of what you wrote about, and I haven't even had brain surgery. You actually began working on the book while you were still recovering. Is that correct?
Yeah, that draft ended up being more like notes than a book.
I'm curious, at what point did you know when the neurosurgeon told you you had a tumor and you were going to need brain surgery? Devastating news for most of us. As a writer, was there some little part of you that said, I'm going to get a book out of this?
Terry, I'm a writer and I'm an alien. Oh, look at that. Oh, dear. Oh, you
Is it
you
flipping?
didn't do these. Oh, wait, how do I get
Oh,
mine?
get the Suzy's.
Are they
Oh,
after this?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
Oh.
Oh, gosh. Yeah,
Oh, here we go. There we go. I am a writer, not an alien. I am an alien. Writers don't waste valuable writing time making up interviews. You know, I was devastated by the news, and as a writer, I think I knew I'd write about it as a way to record this experience and maybe get some perspective, but
So you were this perfectly healthy person. You were, I should say, are athletic. You play volleyball, do these biking marathons. Then in May of '99, you have a seizure.
okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say that I had never been in a hospital overnight. I'd had some stitches or something. This whole diagnosis was my first medical experience, and the whole thing was a new world to me. And I think I went into it writing and drawing because that's what I do. I don't know that somebody who's a gardener or some other, would have approached it the same way. I was just trying to document this bizarre world to myself and for myself. And one of the constraints of literary constraints of memoir in general is that it's a text-based one. Is it's all one voice. You're constrained to one voice, and that can get kind of one note. The freedom that we have with graphic medicine is coming up with these alter egos and different and different visuals and things that can shift that perspective. I immediately, in my own experience, I'm terrified, but I'm immediately imagining, the first thing I imagine is some patient who would be better than I was at being a patient, and she'd be more assertive, and she'd be like, I remember I went in for this CAT scan that had a dye injection, and the woman said, "So do you have any allergies?" And I said, "Oh, lobster, shellfish." She said, "Oh, it's a good thing you said that, because people who have this dye, it can be allergic to this iodine dye if you're allergic to shellfish." And I thought, well, you should ask that, because I just said it thinking it was weird. And then she's about to inject the dye. I said, well, whoa, so what if I'm allergic? Oh, the emergency room is right next door. So that was kind of what I was going through. I'm gonna skip to at this point I've had one neurosurgeon tell me that I have a mass in my head. It has to come out. It's not, something I can put off. I'm not liking that. So I give the films and stuff to a friend of mine whose father is a neurologist, and he said he's going to show them to neurosurgeons at Harvard and radiologists and stuff. So now I'm calling him. Skips ahead a bit in the book. Dr. Thompson had shown my films to the neuroradiologists at both of Harvard's hospital, and he had bad news. It's a tumor. It's not a meningioma, which I'd hoped, and he hesitated. It's not in a good place. That didn't go over as well. Didn't go over as well in Ohio on book tour, but a lot of functions in the brain are duplicated in other areas, he explained, and some of the areas don't have assigned functions, which means we aren't really sure what they do. It would be preferable to have a tumor in one of those areas, say the front of the brain. Your tumor is in the area that controls your upper right side mobility, and there's no duplication of that motor control anywhere else in the brain. So you have to understand that this is brain surgery, and simply exposing the area to the air is going to alter it. You should be prepared to lose some sensation, some fine motor control. Now, did your doctor discuss whether you'd be awake during the surgery? if it were my family, and he considered me family, there are only two places to go for this kind of surgery, Mass General or Brigham and Women's, and he had placed calls to the top neurosurgeons at both, was waiting to hear back. So that little sort of bounce back, you know, I'm okay, is one of the characters. There are many in the book. At the next point that I'm going to read to you, at this point I have the surgery, and spoiler alert, I die. Oh no, it unexpectedly wipes out my speech, reading and writing, not my fine motor control. There are things that I know now that maybe I wish I'd done before, like asking exactly what part of that side of the brain was on, but it was everybody's brain, they'll tell you, is like a fingerprint, so they're organized differently. So at this point, rather than just kind of like, whoa, look at this whole new world, isn't this weird, and how things are and whatever, I am like urgently trying to document myself before any more of it disappears, because they are telling me, this is a totally unexpected result, but they're telling me, oh, it's going to resolve, not a problem. It'll resolve in 6 hours, in 36 hours, in 4 days, in in 6 weeks, and whatever. And I'm finding it's getting worse. And there hadn't been any baseline testing or anything. So I'm writing this stuff down. All right, and drawing it. So I'm going to skip to a follow-up appointment with my neurosurgeon. My sister Meredith drove me to my appointment with Dr. Finn, the neurosurgeon, the next day. There were refreshments out, a festive touch, the difference between the regular office hours and the Friday brain tumor clinic. Katandra, his scheduler, bellowed a big, Suzy Becker, Suzy, I look at you. I knew you'd do great. I forgot to object and smiled up at her from under my hat. One of Dr. Finn's nurses greeted Meredith and me. Listen, you still listen to me still. It's been what, a week? Are you still having trouble with your speech? He didn't touch your sense of humor, did he? I'll kill him. I didn't answer. I couldn't bring myself to smile, even though she'd earned one. Yeah, he did. My sense of humor, my career, my personality, my coping mechanism. Donna sat us down in a couple of chairs. Listen, I have husbands who come in and sit across from me here with their wives who just had surgery, and they ask me, when am I going to get my wife back? And I look at them and say, your wife's right there. You better take care of her. But I know what they mean. She paused. You had brain surgery. If you had knee surgery, you wouldn't expect to be feeling so hunky-dory, right? Give it 4 weeks. I'm talking a month of R&R, rest and relaxation, and let other people, like your sister here, take care of you. Pamper yourself. You see what I'm saying? She inspected my incision. The stitches were ready to come out. You all set with your medications now? No more problems? I nodded. Well, let me see if I can't find Dr. Finn. She's nice, Meredith said after she left. Everybody is, but it must be kind of depressing to work here. It wasn't long before Dr. Finn came in to see us. He wanted to know how my speech was coming. You're telling me you used to be a real motor mouth, huh? Well, it wasn't that I used to be a motor mouth. It's just that at least I used to have a choice, like I could talk if I felt like it. Well, how's your artwork? I showed him the sketches I'd done in the hospital. I have no idea, as I said, before he could say anything. Well, tell me more about that. I could see he was concerned, and I wanted to be able to explain it, but the only words I could come up with were, I lost my impulse. I mean, so you think I took that away? Well, I'm not myself. That was my fallback. Well, he was leaning forward, looking up at me over his glasses under my brim. I'm talking to somebody. He said it so lightly. Some part of you is still there. A half. He leaned back. Well, the neuropsychiatrist's preliminary assessment did show some impairment, but you need to give it some time. Everybody's brain is organized a little differently, and some of the pathways have been disrupted, but they'll repair themselves, or the neurons will find new pathways. I have complete confidence that your brain will heal itself. Give it a month. Meredith and I stopped at the supermarket on the way home. I spotted a neighbor rolling her cart toward us. She was working the opposite side of the aisle, and we had a chance to slip by, but I needed Meredith's cooperation. I wasn't loud, just panicky. She whipped around as if maybe I'd fallen down or was having a seizure. Neighbor. The neighbor had seen us, and now I'd lost her name. Hi. The second hi was in place of her name, although it could have been for her daughter. Meredith had her back to us, studying the shelves. Suzy, how are you? Are you ever around? Stan and I keep wanting to have you over, but I never see your car. We're home this weekend, maybe Sunday? I'll call you. Listen, I like that hat. She rolled by. I was all jittery, as if I'd almost been in a car accident. At the register, I had already run my card through more times than there were possible stripe orientations. The cashier took the card, credit or debit? I didn't know neither. The hat trapped the heat from my head. ATM. She hit a button and slid the card and looked off toward the produce section. Punch in your code. I pointed my finger. The memory was gone. I wish big bolts would pop out of my neck. Meredith shielded me from all the stares. She paid and we left. So all of that actually happened in the summer before I was supposed to have a creative writing fellowship at Radcliffe. And that the book I had proposed there was to document a year in which I'd made the baby decision. So if anybody out there has a biological clock that's ticking, you might recognize what I was trying to monetize. I mean, do there. And Harvard was incredibly generous and said, you know, when I called and kind of stuttered that I wasn't who I had applied, they encouraged me to come ahead and put a couch in my office. But I was on anti-seizure medication, so I couldn't consider getting pregnant. I'm gonna, with the brain book, you know, Tom was talking about these experiences that are really transformations and the transformation that you have in writing and illustrating the experience. It very naturally lends itself to that hero type journey, you know, where you have your character and then they're transformed and they've learned something, and people would say, you know, so did you consider the gift of your experience? And I'd be like, okay, that's the kind of gift, definitely keep the receipt because you do not want to give it to somebody else. But the ending of the brain book is ambivalent. I definitely am recovering, but I'm not necessarily expressing gratitude for the particular experience. In this book, the second book, which is One Good Egg, I don't get a chance to work on that year. I do in like 4 or 5 months after I'm there, I start to write about the brain surgery, thinking it'll be a chapter in that book, and it ends up being the book. I end up touring the book when I'm pregnant. And it's not until my daughter goes to kindergarten that I can consider working on that book that I originally proposed. So at that point, it's like 1/3 about the baby decision, 1/3 about the fertility quest, and then 1/3 about early parenthood.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll read from that now. This is when we go. So my daughter's dad is my longtime friend who lives in Australia. I've married at this point Lorene, and so we're at the airport picking up Steve for what becomes our first what we call the souffle cup sessions. All right, so Steve's flight touched down a few minutes after midnight on November 28th. We met at the curve and exchanged quick hugs, then loaded him into our Civic. Lorene and Steve fell into easy conversation while I concentrated on finding today's way out of Logan Airport. There was a silence in the tunnel. Lorene said, "We're waiting to get a new car until we know whether we're going to get a baby, probably something with 4 doors. And 2 visors," I added, all of a sudden seeing the car through Steve's eyes. The Charles River came into view, lit up on both sides. The night seemed unusually clear and welcoming, full of promise. "Our friend Marianne's coming in the morning," I began. "Noon," Lorene continued. "Marianne's a delivery nurse, and she works out in the western part of the state. She offered how to show us how to do everything." "Oh?" Steve shifted in his seat. "Yeah, Suzy should be ovulating any day now," Lorene volunteered. "Well, good on you," he patted my leg. "Well, good on you," I returned the pat. "Your timing was pretty perfect." The barn light illuminated the white picket fence and the winter remnants of the garden along the walk up to the kitchen door. Given the hour and the next day's agenda, we all agreed to turn in. "Hope you won't mind my bumping around in the middle of the night," Steve said. "I get terrible insomnia coming in this direction." We got him settled in his room and gave him a quick tour of the house. And I'll say at this, you know, I had proposed that book, but with the brain book and with this book, when I don't know how the book the whole experience is gonna go. I'm never sure it's gonna be a book. So, you know, I had been taking notes all along, but, and it does become a book, but anyway. All right, so Lorene says, he's great once we're in bed. I don't know what I expected, but he's completely regular. The way she said it made regular sound exceptional. The next morning, Lorene and I had breakfast and went to work as usual. Steve was sleeping. There was some evidence of insomnia, a mug of unfinished tea, an open magazine on the kitchen table. He was still sleeping when Lorene came home just before noon. She had a bunch of purple irises. They didn't have the white ones. They're for the beginning. So this was the beginning. I was still looking for something to put them in when Mary Ann arrived. She let herself in, predictably, no nonsense. Where's Steve? She asked. Steve entered on cue, semi-dressed, not half nude, wearing his house pants, uncombed and unshaven. Strange night, he said after he and Marianne had been introduced. Anyone else care for a cup of tea? Marianne had a cup. We stood around the kitchen, the two of them sipping tea. Well, how'd you sleep, Steve? Lorene asked. You never believe this, Steve laughed. Most bizarre thing. I don't know that I could tell you the last time. I had a wet dream. Dare I ask, A, how much of a wet dream? Are we talking half, three quarters, the whole wad? B, wow, what was it about? Or C, who's that in the garden? There was a man with a ladder in the garden, tromping on the plants, eyeing the roof above our bedroom. Hello, I called out. Mrs. Becker, you called about your chimney? I closed the door. I called him 5 months ago. I gave up on him 4 months ago. Today is the day he's going to set his ladder up outside our bedroom window? Perfect. Steve and Marianne were cracking up. Lorene went to find a sheet to tack up over our naked window. By the time she returned, the guy was packing up. Marianne set her mug in the kitchen sink and said, well, shall we? I took one of my mother's white souffle cups out of the cabinet and presented it to Steve, and then we filed upstairs, leaving Steve at his bedroom door next door to ours. Marianne laid out her equipment on the bed, a flashlight, speculum, and a small syringe with a flexible plastic catheter tube on the end. Lorene took a closer look at the syringe while I dropped my drawers and got into bed. The three of us chatted like normal people, people with pants on, waiting for Steve's delivery. His knock startled us. It's not much, he apologized. It's fine, thank you, Lorene said, and gently shut the door on him. She tipped the cup to show Marianne. Not bad, Marianne said. I mean, after that story downstairs, I wasn't sure what we'd get. You only need one, right? Marianne had Lorene insert the speculum. She suctioned up Steve's offering, took aim, and pushed the plunger. Lorene propped my hips up on a couple of pillows and kissed my belly. Marianne patted it, hugged Lorene goodbye, and chirped, I want to be the fourth to know, and she was gone. Lorene left the door open. Steve patted in, and the three of us hung out and until I was sure the sperm had made its way down to my sinuses. And then we went downstairs to make dinner. Over the next couple of days, Steve settled in. Having him around during the day instantly made working alone less lonely. I anticipated the shuffling of moccasins across the kitchen floor around 10:30, overtaken by a combination of whistling and humming, overtaken by the orange juicer, the tea kettle whistling and shaking, followed by a silence of varying length as he read during his breakfast, invariably punctuated by an endearing shriek. Mr. or Vita, our dogs, had found an exposed ankle or hand to lick. Then, okay, all right, yes, we're getting to be friends. He would be at his desk working on his novel by the time I came down for lunch. And then when he was ready for a break, he'd call upstairs and the two of us would take the dogs for a long walk. We had another couple of souffle cup sessions over those next 2 nights, and we mixed up our routine. Night number 1, we tried advice number 2, about as exciting as it looked spelled out. Night 2, Steve, self-proclaimed urban shaman, did the laying on of hands. I observed the same hands dropping everything they came into contact with the next day. Steve was still in the grips of his jet-lag insomnia. On night 3, when I made mention of a patch of soap suds on the drying dishes, he threw down his sponge and left the kitchen. I apologized when he came back in half an hour later to make himself some tea. Oh, it's all right, he said, hyper-focused on the tea. You know, I guess it's the first time I wondered what kind of mother you really would be. You're very critical. It was my turn to leave the room. I went to bed. I was still reading when Lorene came up. Hey, do you feel pregnant? I don't feel any different. I thought about it. Maybe sometimes I feel a slight something on my right side, but it's only been a few days. Why? When did you first feel pregnant? The next day. You know, I remember taking the mail out of the mailbox and I knew. But then I never felt like that again. I wouldn't believe it until I heard his heartbeat. Our exchange prompted an informal survey of my mother friends, like when and how did you know you were pregnant? More than half of my respondents admitted to being clueless or wrong, and the others gave prenatal symptoms, which all sounded pretty premenstrual to me. So I asked my mother, did you ever feel pregnant? Only the first time. I told your father, and he took me to see Dr. Schumann, Grandpa Jack's doctor. Dr. Schumann had examined me and told me I wasn't pregnant. Examined you how? Well, what do you mean how? Well, how did he examine you? Did he do an internal? Oh, please, Suzanne. 7 months after Dr. Schumann's exam, my big brother was born. So I'm going to stop there. Again, in this book, I sort of resist the hero arc thing by describing a parallel universe, because part of maintaining your sanity as you go through infertility treatments is, you know, investing in what if this doesn't happen, which is at the age of 41, by the time I got pregnant. I did IVF once, ended up with an ectopic pregnancy, and the second time it worked out, but you know, it was not likely. And so we really made elaborate plans for converting our barn into a studio and holding workshops and traveling and maybe joining the Peace Corps and all these things. So I do go into that. I want to, I thought of this when Tom and I started talking. This guy, Izzy Layman, who wrote the memoir Heavy, which is a wonderful book. He talks about this, the importance and power of doing this work that we do. For the first time in my life, I realized that telling the truth was way different from finding the truth. And finding the truth has everything to do with revisiting and rearranging words and images, we can say in our case. Revisiting and rearranging words didn't only require vocabulary, it required will and maybe courage. Revised word patterns were revised thought patterns, and revised thought patterns shape memory. And that is at the heart of some trauma resolution therapy that is done with people who have experienced it. The last thing I'll leave you with, because when Tom was his estimation of my thinking that the story hasn't been told or isn't a shared story, I'm glad I never thought of that myself, because I write with the assumption that there is someone out there who's had my experience and this will resonate with them. And it turns out it resonates with a broader group of people than you'll ever think. I think the more personal your truth, the more universal it.
Very gross like.
Yeah, there we go. She wouldn't have me on the damn show then. She was embarrassed that I idolized her in it. Okay, so this that's from a poem by Sean Thomas Doherty. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You got your pen?
Yeah, because I need to make notes.
Yeah. Let all this be quick. I'm so sorry. Thanks. And I want to mention one thing that's actually the first thing in Suzy's book, which is relevant to our talk. And I realize our slides are out of order, so I'm going to go back and find it. No, I think it's me, because I think I never said insert it here. There. Suzy said it's the first thing in the book, actually. I don't want to give away the whole story, but writing this book was my recovery. And that's, to me, that's sort of one of the thesis statements of what we're talking about today. And what I meant when I said that, like,
Do you read your thing?
no, it's on here. It's there. So like when I read the brain surgery book, I noticed so much like map making and graphs, and I'll show those. And to me, it was trying to say, like, where the hell am I? There's supposed to be a way to know what the hell to do here, but it seemed like, and so there's so many maps, and some are funny, like this one, you know, crossing the international worry line. And there's all the more maps here, evolution of your office. I think there's a map of the barn that you mentioned in the egg book. And there's diagrams where you're trying to sort of locate, okay, this is where things are in this story, which hasn't been told before. And you're right that I think one reason that artists like yourself tell stories is because other people aren't telling them, right? So there are shared stories, we do have them, but not a lot of people have told them. That's what I think. Graphs, lots of graphs, and And again, you're trying to quantify things that don't get quantified, that don't get talked about. How optimistic are you feeling? Negative 1 million or plus 1 million? How many promises did you in fact keep? You know, these things don't get talked about, and that's why you're such a good humorist, I think. Very fine line. Also doesn't get very talked about between optimism and denial. And I think the same thing is true of all I need to know is that I learned from my cat is like the same thing. It's like you're trying to say like, hey, like nobody gave me the instruction manual for life, but like I think the cat's got it down. To me, that's sort of the same thing. So that said, my passage was a little bit different, I think. Or maybe it wasn't, I don't know. What happened was, and I'll show you, this is just one slide and then I'll do a little reading. Was I had this intense loss, which we'll talk about, and then a sort of like intense 5 weeks where my brain sort of rattled around and body and everything else. And then I spent 3.5 or 4 years trying to sort of relive those 5 weeks and sort of integrate them into what I experienced. And so I'll explain what these slides are. So now we got Suzy. This got a great laugh, by the way. That one. Yeah, right. And that's one of my favorites too. All right.
I had to promise not to degrade Herman Munster's.
Did you really?
I did.
Oh, wow.
It was permission.
Oh my gosh. This book is available upstairs with Liz, and Suzy's books are available right here at the end of this. So you should
buy them for no other reason than that they're really heavy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. My book is about the loss of my daughter who died just before her 2nd birthday. I'm gonna whip through some of these slides because it's a very long slideshow, but the important parts I'll read. This is the last photo we took together. This was 2011. For some reason, we took some selfies around that time, so that's us. Very, very, very unhappy. I'll get past those. Okay. I'm going to skip through the process pieces. I show these when I do process talks. But after the sudden loss, we did a lot. All we could do was stay in the present. And we did a lot of walking. This is me and my wife. And we did a lot of noticing, taking photos, walking around and noticing just weird little things like this overturned couch over here. Kind of looked like a boat, this like weird pipe in the ground, this little shoe, just walking around, lots and lots of walking. And I took a lot of notes because that's often what I'd done. But we were lucky enough to be able to take some time off and get out of town. And so we went to this place which calls itself a grief retreat in New Mexico, outside of Santa Fe. It looks like that. And that's my attempt at drawing the plane at the time. That was pretty, and I don't even know why I wrote the word broke there, but you can imagine. But anyway, so things were kind of broken. But we did a lot of traveling to that grief lodge that I mentioned, or the grief retreat. And what you're going to see now are a mixture of like finished pieces, photographs, and sketches. And then I'll do a little bit of a reading. There are these dogs that appeared, and those will appear in the reading. That sort of almost prevented us from getting there. And that's us sort of doing some therapy stuff. Again, I'll do a reading, so I'll skip through some of this stuff a little quickly. Driving, some noticing of things, some noticing of things that were still alive, you know, like when you're suffering enormous grief, it's hard to believe anything's still alive sometimes. More walking. Now we're in New Mexico. And we're also visiting people, and this person happens to be a friend of my wife's, and this friend lost her 13-year-old daughter when my wife was 13, and they were friends. And so in a lot of ways, we were sort of soaking up stories and hearing about other people's losses. There were about 8 or 9 of them that I collected in the book, sort of corresponded to this 9-panel grid. Anyway, more sketches. So like I said, I'm going to zip through some of these. When we got, this is Hawaii, we were really lucky that it was Christmas time and we had contacts there that said, you know, Hawaii's kind of empty, you know, Christmas time, or at least this part was, we have this free cottage, so we scraped up the money and flew there. And again, we're noticing more things that are alive, these young teen boys with this baby goat, which were where we were staying, and more visible photographs and process pieces. And again, like I said, I'll give a little reading after all this. Our friend Jeff, who lived near us, was in a horrible car accident just days after. Yeah, sorry. And so we all sort of convalesced in the same house together, him getting over his surgery, us just sort of lost. And then slowly taking notes and putting the book together. Okay, I'm going to skip this thing. I can talk about it later, but it's a sort of warm-up comment. And then after that, like I said, so that's our 5-week sort of bunch of traveling. And in that traveling, we're trying to deal with this new reality, right? This new reality is that our daughter is gone, and there's no way of getting around that. And so I understood it in words, but I didn't my body still was miserable and didn't really understand it. So I spent 3 years reliving those 5 weeks. And so that meant like, okay, what is walking? What did walking look like? And taking photographs of my own feet and trying to redraw it. And so I spent a great long period of time trying to relive that experience, because the experience was healing, but it wasn't enough. And noticing, actually this is in the reading, so I'll get to it later, but trying to recapture, there's those dogs, there are those boys with that goat, and just trying to find, again, to some degree putting a frame around it and trying to sort of understand it, but also just actually literally reliving it in my body again and again. So there's a bunch of process pieces. And there's that last photo, drawing of it anyway. Okay, skipping through this, and then go right to the reading, which is here. And I'll read those 2 sections. When we walk the neighborhood, I see images everywhere. This sewage drain is my broken rib cage. I walk by this overturned sofa 3 times before I realize that it's not a broken boat. And every sign takes on a new meaning. Church, fire lane, you ain't kidding. Other images, clipped from random Japanese comic stories, fall out of my notebook, and I try to decipher them. This one, a woman in a swimming lane. I redraw it. She looks horrified. And it takes me ages to realize that this thing on the right isn't some malevolent piece of machinery emerging from the depths. It's just a lane marker. And over her head is a 2, not some giant question mark like the one that hovers over ours. Then a photograph of a lost boy, a detective story, a lost lover, a childhood photo. I have no idea what the kanji and katakana say. And then I realize, why did I assume this boy was lost? Why was I carrying these pictures around? I'm looking for more clues, more portents. Should I have known she was going? Another image appears, an aborted cartoon daydream. A man and a woman adrift on a raft, making their slow way to somewhere. I've been doodling this for years, never knowing what it's about, never knowing where they're going. And now I know they aren't going anywhere. They're just leaving, fleeing, moving forward from some horrible loss. And then a series of catastrophes. Jeff's been in a bad car accident. He's got a hole in his abdomen. There's lots of internal bleeding. His wife is away at school for 3 months. We'll move in with him soon. Days later, we'll see the car. I get my friend Sarah on the phone. She reminds me that her own brother died when she was 13. I ask her lots of questions. Was it hard? How did you do it? Do you still feel it? I think I have to go check on Leela. Oh, there's a missing plot point here, but it's not important. Leela cries into the ground. I cry into her arms. We don't kiss. We walk the neighborhood and collect acorns. I write and take photos and shadows of shadows and animals. And that's what we've become, shadows and animals. Leela takes to eating raw steak with her hands. When we're lucky, we sleep and forget. That's section 1. Section 2, I'm going to skip. It's good, but section 3, the last section. I can't believe we've survived this long. We drive the 30 minutes up the mountain to the center. Okay, left at the small bridge, right at the pine tree. The car is having trouble. Nowhere on the site's directions did it say the roads are steep, rocky, muddy, and covered in ice. We're stuck. Stuck in a mythic narrative, moving from the old world to the new. I'm aware of this imagery. I'm going to try and back up. And I'm thinking that thresholds like this always have, oh Christ, guardians. And there's those dogs. My jeez. This car's not going anywhere. Can you call the center? Woof, 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 woof. Nice dog. I get out and try and push. Try everything. Cardboard under the tires. Woof, 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 woof. Okay, step on the gas. Which one's the gas? My wife doesn't drive. Slam. And it's weird. Those dogs like just kind of got quiet as soon as I slammed the door. The lady at the center says we just have to get some momentum. Right. Oh yeah, one last. So now we're past that and we're going to a friend's house. We wash up at Kate and Lisa's. Lisa is an old friend of Leela's mother. Leela and Lisa's daughter, Tara, were good friends until age 13 when Tara was run over by a car and killed. There's a picture. Bless you. Leela says everyone's grief is a straggly island. We should do more ritualistic things. Grief is such a kind, almost light word, but grieve is not. Like what? Go to church? Sit in groves. Pronounce it wrong and it's grave. We sit in our broken sofa grave along the banks of the Cartoon River and grieve. It is a church, but a stone version of a grove. Can we move from wishing our own deaths to be soon and swift to being open to the deep symbology of everything? Quote from John Berger: animals first entered the imagination as messengers and promises. Animals come over the horizon. They belong there and here. Likewise, they were immortal and immortal. And everything is a message. Everything beautiful is her. Every periwinkle butterfly, every red bird at the feeder, the mist after the rain through the window screens. Leela says, I was so sad in her earliest infancy, so heavy-hearted. Did I know we wouldn't be having her very long? We're in a new world where we have to find the meaning in front of us. Do you remember our landlords in Gainesville telling us that the acorns will land on the metal roof and sound like an explosion? No. Bang. She's here, but she's not here. What message is the world sending? In the weeks before, I became obsessed with Gustave Verbeek's Upside Down comics. The images are read once, and then the story continues when the image is turned upside down. I started doodling simple ones of my own in those last days, using Verbeek's original characters. Here the lady with the crazy hat is looking for the old man, and the clouds rain tears of sympathy. Turn it upside down. Later, the cloud turns to a lake, and the old man is left all alone. In later sketches, lightning becomes a tree. And my sketchbook after these entries is empty except for her drawing. I hope that's the end. It's, sorry, kind of grim. Anyway, that's the book. And Liz would kill me if I didn't say it's upstairs for sale. I also want to mention again, Sequential Artist Workshop, where we do a lot of graphic artists and stuff. So I hope you'll come join us at sawcomics.org. But now we can take questions and yeah, or whatever, Caroline. Caroline's in charge.
Yeah.
I think.
All right, let's take that. All right. So
Because we didn't start.
Can I ask you a question?
That's up to Caroline.
yeah, so how about
Yeah, I do have a
talk
question.
for a bit?
And then I just wanted to ask you, because of the thought of this writing and drawing being a right, and incorporating where your wife didn't write and draw, but you guys were together. Did she have what, did it help her to see the writing? Like how was
Well, she's a better artist than I,
Oh, okay, did she write?
by a long shot, and she drew about it, but it took her years later. Well, I was writing and drawing immediately, almost immediately, and she drew about it years later, maybe 3 or 4 after we had another kid. And she's been pretty intense processing of it. That's satisfactory. Okay, I'm happy to talk about it more. Caroline, should we just take questions that, okay, go ahead, I saw one over here, right? You, and then you, I guess? Sorry to say you, I know it's rude.
I just wondered if you could, follow up on a comment that you made that writing the book was important about things. Talk more about that book.
So I think it goes back to the lemon, comment, or however we've seen it, it gives you some control over the narrative about, when things happen to you, and you can record them very methodically. But when you go back and you make sense of them and tell the story, you are able to frame and reframe that narrative over time. And also it was healing because there was, especially when I was tracking myself, that I was worried about losing things, parts of myself. I literally, I ended up after that, like for years, I would park like an old person because I was so used to holding my head very still because I didn't want to jar it, and because I had all this memories and I didn't want to jar. And so there was an unburdening to feeling.
I pulled that up, I pulled this computer up because I talked to Suzy a couple of days ago and I said, she said a little more. That's exactly what use the word unburdening. I really like that. Yeah. Should I answer that too? Yeah, for me, it really was like, I wasn't going to survive if I didn't make that book. And that book was one of those rare occasions where I was not trying to communicate really for anybody. I needed to do it to stitch my mental understanding of the world back together. And that was the only way I could do it. I don't know if that's clear enough. We had a question over here first, and then we
Partially answered. I was more curious about, as it relates to the book being in the process for recovery, how your relationship has changed over time to your book and to sharing your book.
I can definitely speak to that. I'll be real quick.
Yeah.
Like, I just breezed through this like, oh, I lost my daughter in 2011. That's like nearly the first time I've said it in that kind of capacity, but it's kind of best for time. But usually I stand up there for about 60 seconds and like, okay, here's the story. But it was it's getting to be that was even 15 years ago or something now. And so it's easier for me to talk about it now. But I made an interesting, if not stupid, mistake, and then I called the book the name of my daughter. And so I don't ever say the name of the book. It's the name of a girl, not a book. And so I really didn't even say the name of that. But publishers really like it when you say it. So that's kind of a problem.
The book came out 5 years after my surgery, and I toured it, and I was all of a sudden, so about 75% of the audience would be literary, like people would be going to a reading, and then about 25% would be survivors. And they were, many of them had much worse outcomes than I did, and I felt freaked out. Like I was afraid that I was going to have a recurrence, which was quite possible, and I was going to end up worse. And I was sort of given this survivor's mantle, and I thought, like, all I did was lie. That I did not do. I just didn't look. I didn't do anything. Over time, though, it's one of those invisible things, and you find out it's so not spoken about. So I have caps and things, and I've just people feel seen, and the humor is so valuable to so many people and caregivers, and and I'll say the other relationship with it is that I have now, so that this book has sold over 2 million copies and been published in 50 languages. this book sold 30,000 copies, and I hear from people that still, like at least twice a month. And so, but a lot of them have died, and so I carry all of that with me, so, it's I had the choice, when I was working on, when I was working on at Harvard, the Ensemble Studio Theater invited me to come and turn it into a one-woman show. And so I worked on it for a summer on this one-woman show. And I just got to the end, I felt like I can't relive. This is like, also, it's like, this is stopped in time, and I have gone on. I think had I not had my child, maybe that would have been okay, but I have another chapter. There's some people who have that identity and that is important, and that works for them. But I just, at the end of the summer, I was like, I cannot stand up there and do this all this time. So yeah.
What do you mean you have camps?
Oh, thank you for asking.
Oh, okay.
What is that?
It's a, should we take your question?
You answered it.
We did?
Yeah, you did.
Anybody not have a question answered? We have like a.
Are you selling those? Oh, yeah, everything is for sale.
What about those cool sneakers?
You can definitely
These are my daughter's hand-me-downs. They'll be ready to give you, she'll have another. pair.
You had a question?
I'm sorry if this is maybe, I don't know if you wanna, it's sort of what Caroline already asked, but I was sort of shocked that Leela Foreman is your wife, because like, I recognized her right away from the photographs, and I was like, it can't be, and then you said, so I was immediately, I thought, when I heard her speak, I had no idea she's lived through such horrible tragedy. So if you could maybe talk a little bit more, if it's not too personal, about how, like, did she not want to draw about it? Because you just mentioned, as your answer to Caroline's question, that you were the first person drawing it. How, like, she did not see that as a way to.
It just wasn't happening. I don't know. I don't think she was interested. I've always processed things quicker and through comics, and she was just shell shocked and dazed and upset for years. And then she started painting. Actually, I think she actually transitioned from line work and flat colors to painting, and that might have had something to do with it, actually. And I think, now I can't remember if it was when she was pregnant or the second time or after the birth of our child, to be honest. I'd be able to look at the magazines and check back, but eventually it started coming out. We did quite a few stories about it. Is that okay? And you can definitely email it. And I really kept to myself making that book. I would do it sometimes in the same room, but I barely checked into her about it or anything like that. 1 minute. So it was definitely we definitely processed separate. It definitely took her a long time. Sure. There was one all the way in the back.
And a question for Tom, well, he was kind of at the brief.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there's like one or multiple things that you found that you did at that.
Because of time, I'm gonna say it's in the book. But sorry. But also, like, we had a little bit of therapy, and we just met some really lovely people, and we had, as slowly and simple as it sounds, we had a yoga session that was really profound, but I think it's just because we were just in this vulnerable state. And the therapist we had was really good. We also did one of these indigenous sweat lodge things, which was kind of cool, but honestly, I think that the therapist was really clear-headed and very direct and had experienced this over and over and over again. But that weird yoga session was kind of magic. And I keep trying to recapture that moment. It's in the book. And like I said, I'm like, oh man, I once felt that, but I no longer feel it. This sort of permeable wisdom between the body and the spirit that I have. Yeah. Sorry, we're definitely getting kicked out. That's what David.
No, not necessarily,
One last thing,
It's up to David.
I haven't read your book, but I read that book and I wanted some movie I can't tell.
That is a lovely note to go out on, yes. Certainly, round of applause. If you like, you may stay in this room for panel D, but if you are interested in panel C, Joel Christian Gill moderating the many graphic medicine publishers. That's happening back upstairs in room. It's reversed.
Things in here.
That's the case. I will double check, but move to your next panel. So I'm figuring that out right now. Yeah, I know. Matthew told me otherwise.
Download the program. I've been looking for a printed program and all I see are these dots.
So.
Suzy and I will be upstairs.
I have been officially told that we are having panel D here.
She is here.
So the moment Joel is here.
D, panel D is here, so.
Upstairs.
Joel's upstairs.
It's gonna be upstairs. I see.
If we didn't have a QR, there wasn't no QR codes, we would know.
Yeah, I know, you're
Never
right.
pieces of paper. Buy one of Susie's books and hats, please.
Very proud. So this is gonna be panel D, the creation and lightning. The publisher's panel is gonna be upstairs in C. They're upstairs in 607. On every floor, we've got a restroom right there
I forgot to
and the
mention-
same approximate space on the 6th floor.
I used to work at Harvard Medical School as an ad assistant.
4 minutes? We'll wait for you. There's
Yeah,
a letter.
You know anything about Harvard Medical? Are you connected directly?
Matthew.
Yeah.
I'll ask Matt.
Yeah. He's the librarian for them.
Thanks so much. I think you did okay, but Caroline would be the one to ask.
I'm sure I did, Chris. You had over there wrapped in that.
How about Zoom? Should we say goodbye to Zoom? Goodbye.
Yeah, that's right. Caroline said, sit.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you'll get all the materials and we'll have videos. But
I am upset with our tech department for how this went down, but as long as everyone's having a good and reasonable time here. Hi, David. Nice to see you in person. So glad you could be here. We're gonna get some things set up, so. That's all right. Any part of it's welcome. I'm glad you're so nice about it.
going upstairs.
Yeah, I think I'll put it in and tell people to buy the book.
Thank you both. for doing this.
Thanks, David. This is pretty good.
Thank you.
We'll chat more after. My favorite program.